Hello and welcome to the third and final installment of a very special series, The Spirit of Santos de Cartier, here on Monocle Radio. This show is a journey. It begins all the way back in 1904, when Louis Cartier granted the wish of the famous Brazilian aviator Alberto Santos Dumont to be able to read the time while flying. The birth of the first watch, specifically designed to be worn on the wrist, sealed the bonds of friendship between these two pioneers and started an incredible story. It's a pleasure to welcome you for this final episode, recorded live in Paris. I'm Natalie Theodosi, Monocle's fashion director. Last time, we discussed the cultural impact of the Santos with insights from two leading voices in the watch industry. Today, we conclude with an in-depth conversation from inside the Maison itself, with Cartier's Director of Image, Style and Heritage, Pierre Rainero.
It's a prerequisite for a person to be elegant, that the object should be at the service of the person, of the movement, of the freedom of movement of the people.
This is a celebration of the enduring spirit of the Santos de Cartier. Welcome to the Spirit of Santos de Cartier. My final guest of the series is Pierre Rainero, Cartier's Image, Style and Heritage Director, who joined me at the Monocle Café on Rue Bachemont to share his own insightful stories about the genesis and enduring appeal of the Santos. We spoke over morning coffees in front of an audience of designers, collectors, and friends of both our brands. Pierre reflected on how Cartier's philosophy of elegance, combined with functionality, is embodied in the Santos, and considered how the design of the timepiece has evolved over the decades to reflect contemporary life. We began by looking back at Louis Cartier and Alberto Santos Dumont's original vision.
The Santos effectively is very important in the history of watchmaking. Important also for Cartier, definitely, because it's also, let's say, a vehicle of our point of view on what makes an object beautiful for many reasons. As you know, we are in 1904. Louis Cartier, who belongs to the third generation of the family, joined the company in 1998. He was 23 years old and is, I think, very different from, let's say, the previous members of the family, because he belongs to a new generation. Let's think about 1900. So he's 25 in 1900. And let's think about everything that happened at that moment, and especially the changes in terms of techniques, in terms of society. It's the appearance of of course, and the generalization of the electricity, for instance, electric bulbs everywhere. So the perception of what you see is different with a new type of light. So it gives a total different attention to creations and objects. That's also very important to notice. The notion also of communications in general. Telephone is a new thing. The speed is the new attempts to create cars, to create speedboats, to create, of course, planes, and we will come to that. So again, Louis Cartier belongs to a generation of people who wonder why, in that very quick changing world, the decorative arts, the applied arts don't evolve at the same path. People still live in an environment which is everything linked, I would say, with the past. And, at the time when you would have talked about style was necessarily an allusion to something from the past. Everything was neo-Renaissance, neo-Louis XIV, neo-something. And that's the story of the 19th century, by the way. So he had the idea that something had to be invented in terms of shapes, world of shapes, and especially in applied arts. So that's the engine behind his will to create new things. And is obsessed by those two dimensions. The one of course, inventing new shapes to match this evolution that was perceived as very strong. And at the same time, there's another obsession. I mention obsession because it's part of our way of creating till now. And it's also to be totally relevant with the life of our clients. So is always, and Cartier is also always wondering what will be the role of the objects we create in the life of our clients. And when you raise that question, it has incredible results because it's also a balance between making objects that are only beautiful but not relevant. Because if you create something very, very beautiful, it will go on a shelf to be admired. And that's not what Cartier is about. And that's what Louis Cartier will develop as a philosophy. Our objects have to be enjoyed and have to be part of the life of the people. So it's in that context that in 1904, Louis Cartier talks to his friend Alberto Santos Dumont. As you know, Santos Dumont is Brazilian. He's part of a quite wealthy family, and he decided to leave Brazil to live in Paris and to experiment new ways of communicating. And of course, planes, and before planes, it was balloons at the same time as planes, by the way. And, the idea was to fly as long as possible. And, the measure of time was key. And all let's say the instrument to measure times were pocket watches. And so the idea to take your watch out of your jacket to measure the time while, it was a question of 2 more meters to fly and 2 more seconds also to be on top of a field. So it was impossible. So he complained about that, and that's how the idea came to Louis Cartier to create something for his friend, and that's how he created the first Santos watch. And in fact, it's very interesting because in our archives there was no marketing at the time. The names of the objects were not decided to be communicated to the public. The names that are to qualify the objects are there to be sure that everybody within the house will know which objects we are talking about. And for this watch, it's inscribed Santos. So it was the watch offered to Mr. Santos Dumont. So in terms of shapes, it's very interesting. And why is it considered like the first design wristwatch? It's not the first watch that was invented to be worn on the wrist. Let's be precise. In the 19th century, and especially for women, the trend was to wear 2 similar bracelets on each wrist, and one of them could include a watch. So the idea to include a watch to be worn on the wrist was something that existed before. But to have an object specially designed to be worn on the wrist to show the time, that was the first time ever. And the inspiration is very interesting because it's not a reproduction of a clock. It's a totally new design. And the originality of it is the way it's attached to the strap is included in the design of a case. And this is the revolution because, soldiers, for instance, because they had the same problem as Santos had, soldiers in the past did attach their pocket watch on the wrist with a strap, but it was totally artificially linked to the wrist. It's also interesting in another way, I think, because it conveyed immediately a certain type of elegance. So now I have to, let's say, to talk about the notion of elegance, which is central at Cartier.
And both Louis Cartier and Santos Dumont were known for being quite dandy and elegant in the Paris scene, right?
Probably it was a common preoccupation to them, but I think what I wanted to explain about our notion of elegance is that at Cartier, of course, we are totally conscious that elegance is totally subjective. It can be personal, it can be cultural, but for us, one condition to be respected, to be elegant, is also to respect the person, and to respect the person is to respect the freedom of movement and the freedom of attitude. So it means that every single Cartier object is conceived with the idea to include a certain notion of ergonomy. And for us, someone elegant is someone who doesn't go through a kind of constraint If you wear something too heavy, too big, it's not at your service. You're at the service of the object you show. You know what I mean? So that's at Cartier, our notion of elegance. It's a prerequisite for a person to be elegant, that the object should be at the service of the person, of the movement, of the freedom of movement of the people. Also allows me to touch another topic. Each shape we accept to offer to the clients, we think of a future of this shape, and this shape should contain in itself the possibility to different variations. That's essential in the choices we make in terms of design at Cartier. In fact, what we do consider at Cartier as a strong design is not only the strength of the originality. It has to be very different from what already exists on the market, but it should be strong enough to contain the different variations for the future. And I think the Santos had many, and will have probably in the future, other variations. So we are very, very demanding with ourselves when we work on new shapes, and we always think of a next step in terms of design, thanks to that idea.
And speaking of the evolution and different variations, I think it's interesting when you see the Santos developing over the years. In many ways, it reflected what was going on in society at the time, whether it was what was happening when the Second World War broke out, to the resurgence that it had in the 70s and 80s. So could you pinpoint certain moments in history that were quite critical in the history of the watch, and how did the design, sometimes even the name, evolve over the years?
There is, I think, many examples of what you mentioned, and it's very, very important, effectively, to mention that. I think one of the most important evolution of the Santos watch, that is in line with the evolution of time, is the changes that occurred in 1978, when we systematically equipped that model with a metal bracelet. That was very, very important, because it meant also that we took into consideration the evolution of a very notion of elegance also, and also of working people. In fact, in the 70s, the society had changed, as of course you imagine, and more people were working. And it was difficult, the difference of the beginning of the 20th century, to change your attire at every moment during the day. In the 70s, you were going to work, you were going to, I don't know, maybe whether play tennis at lunchtime or have a power lunch, I don't know, whatever. And then if you were invited at the cocktail, you didn't have time to go back home. So the idea to wear an elegant watch all day long, and also, let's say, suitable for also sporty circumstances, solid enough, waterproof, that was mandatory at the time. And that's why the Santos evolved to that model equipped with a metal bracelet. So this is, for me, effectively an evidence of that preoccupation of proposing an elegant object, but at the same time integrating the new ways of life within society and the people of our clients. And I think the new model we introduced in 2017 that proposes to have the possibility to change the metal bracelet into the leather strap at your convenience is also a step forward, because then it's another way to be pursuing those two notions of elegance. You could consider that the metal bracelet is more sporty, and you could consider that the leather strap is more, let's say, elegant and less casual, probably. And you buy the watch and you have two possibilities, and we patented that system to change the bracelet into a strap in a very easy way.
It's interesting you speak about kind of a play of contrast of casual and also elegant, and, evolving the design, but also keeping it very close to the original. And speaking to sometimes even collectors, they say Cartier watches have this feel of like both vintage and modern. Is that the recipe for success that you've been having?
Two things. I would not talk about contrast between elegance and casual. We hope that our casual versions are still conveying a certain notion of elegance, for sure. And for the second part of your question, It's because of what I explained previously, because effectively in our offer, we have designs that are deeply rooted in history. Of course, the Santos is now 121 years old. But I think what is interesting is how young generations who are not totally aware of a timeline do look at the object with fresh eyes. That's what is important, I think, to continue to show those objects, to propose those objects in our range, because they have their own relevance. So I don't think, not only I don't think, I'm sure that the desirability of Cartier objects today is linked with nostalgia. Not at all. I don't think so at all. If they wouldn't be suitable for the contemporary life, nobody would buy them. Definitely. It's because they can be naturally part of the life of people today that our objects are desirable.
It's such an interesting point. It's a big conversation. I think we also have people in the audience that work in fashion and other aspects of design, where it's an industry that's always seeking novelty or is depending too much on nostalgia. So it's this very fine balance that designers of any sort have to achieve, right?
It's very interesting what you mentioned. Recently, I was interviewed by Le Monde, and the title of the article was "Jewelry: The Chance of Heritage." And I told the journalist that, it's not something systematic. I think, again, that idea of relevance is key, and you shouldn't play with that idea of nostalgia. Nostalgia is a state of mind, is not shared by everybody first. Really, the idea of relevance of both aspects, design, wearability, is key. And of course, because Cartier has such a great number of, let's say, well-known shapes, it's very difficult in a way to say, what about new shapes? But in fact, one of our best seller today has been designed in 2007. It's the Ballon Bleu shape. So, you can still bring something new in the world of watchmaking. It's not only linked to something that already existed. And creativity is something, of course, we value a lot, but there are many, many different ways of being creative.
Amazing. I think that's a great note to end on, and we can all take away, play, pleasure, and just being a little bit eccentric like Alberto Santos Dumont and Cartier. Thank you so much. We can open up to questions if anyone has them, and there's a mic at the back.
I have one. What has become a statement more today? So we look on your smartphone to know what time is it. So do you think that will return, that we give it up to go back to a real watch? What do you think?
I think it's a very interesting question, because for me, the idea of having the possibility to read time everywhere, it's on your microwave. It's in the street and everywhere. So it means that if you make the choice to wear an object on your wrist, it's because really it provides you something different than giving the time. It provides you the pleasure of the beauty of the object. And that's why also probably there's another challenge, because, the accuracy of the time on your watch is something that is not an obsession now for many, many people. And that's why also there's a kind of cult of the mechanical movement in many, many ways for many people, because in fact, there's also that notion not only of something beautifully designed, but also something of beautifully made. So it's a statement of those values, I think, that the people choose to wear. And being a jeweler, we look at it also as a way of wearing these objects like you wear a piece of jewelry. It becomes at the same time a projection of your own taste, an ornament on your body, and it's also a way for you to share the values you have in terms of art and craftsmanship. And for Cartier, in fact, it's a way of giving more focus on our values in producing that kind of object. So I think it's not because time is everywhere that a beautifully made and beautifully designed watch will not be worn. On the contrary, in a way.
First of all, thank you so much. That was so interesting that I just want to read a book about Cartier right now. Just after I have a lot of notes. Thank you so much. So precisely this week, it started Monday, I think. Like on my phone, it was. I had like so many article popping up on Instagram and everything talking about Cartier. I mean, the title was like, Cartier is considered as the favorite Gen Z watch label today. And honestly, from Monday, I received that many times. Is that a subject that this week you were talking about in the corridor in the Cartier's building? Is that something that you talk about?
Yes, yes. Yeah. Yes. The answer is yes. I would lie if I wouldn't say no. Of course, yes. In fact, it's tempting to say, oh yes, we did well our job and we were very good and things. We have to be also humble because and we were talking about that just before this session started, by the way. The watchmaking market went through a period of time when some values were cultivated, but were not traditional Cartier values, especially on watches for men. I think from the 80s, there was a kind of incredible interest for the mechanics, the shapes, and also it came and the comparison was very obvious between cars and watches. And watches were announced or presented like the ultimate evidence of masculinity. And as a consequence, for many people, the volume of a watch, the complexity of a watch, whatever the notion of ergonomy I was mentioning, was the dominating values. And it's only, I think, 5-10 years ago, but at the side, I say not as a replacement, but at the side of those values came back that idea of, yes, a man can be elegant. It's not something that, I will not betray my gender if I decide to be elegant, and something like this. And, especially in some markets, Asia, in Asia, the idea of masculinity and femininity is not at all in the same, paradigm as in other countries. Italy, Great Britain are different also market. There's a tradition of, men elegance also deeply rooted. And you see that now in all those markets or cultures, I would say, before being markets, there are cultures. Now there's a space for men, and especially now we are going back to Gen Z. Maybe it's linked to the new generations of men who enjoy different values about masculinity and who look at the objects they wear in a total different manner with a lot more freedom. In fact, and that's why we should be very happy, because in fact, when you go beyond rules or social prejudices, it's to the benefit of more freedom of behavior. And we now see that growing freedom of behavior on the side of men, I think. So this is very interesting as a shift in the entire watchmaking world, I think.
That was Pierre Rainero, Cartier's image, style, and heritage director. And that concludes the episode and the series The Spirit of Santos de Cartier, a Monocle Radio production brought to you in partnership with Cartier. The program was produced and edited by Lily Austin. I'm Natalie Theodosi. Thank you for listening.